We have a lot to talk about today. We have had one hell of a week. We have had the Warner Brothers Discovery earnings call with David Zaslav just dropping bombs right and left. Mortal Kombat 12, new Lord of the Rings movies with Peter Jackson and Embracer Group being involved. As Peter Jackson stated to Variety, he has been kept in the loop along with his partners at New Line Cinema every step of the way so far since Zaslav has been trying to relaunch this. Doesn't appear to me in any way, shape, or form that these are actually going to be reboots. I can't see Peter Jackson doing that at all. We're going to talk about more about what they might do at this point. Of course, Hogwarts Legacy. As I predicted to you, like a few days after the thing launched, David Zaslav on a previous earnings call talked about how they were going to, quote-unquote, work with JK, in his words, to revitalize or reboot the Harry Potter franchise. Now, I think he used the word reboot, probably not like we think of it, but I said, given the success in the last week or so of the Hogwarts Legacy video game, I guarantee you the roadmap is right there for Warner Brothers. They know exactly what they need to do. One of the biggest, fastest-selling video games of all time had already crossed $850 million in retail sales in the first 2 weeks. And I had projected that based on early estimates that by the end of the first 30 days, we're probably going to be looking at somewhere close to 20 million units sold. And that's not even counting when the PS4 sales go online, I think in April at this point. So Warner Brothers is looking like they are going to definitely look at the Hogwarts Legacy property at this point for either a cinematic boot or maybe something as a series on HBO Max, but I guarantee you they're not walking away from that IP, not after the success that it's had. And of course, Ant-Man sucks right now. It is so bad. This was the launch of the Marvel Cinematic Universe Phase 5, and it's tanked. It's absolutely tanked. I thought it might hover in the mid to low 60s on its second weekend drop, only because the first weekend open for that film was rather soft compared to previous Marvel entries. You know, we've crunched the numbers and done the math on every Marvel title since Phase 4 began, and they have a very distinctive pattern that we've tracked. This one said, nah, we're going to breach 70% drop in the second week, and that's where we are. Is the MCU effectively dead at this point? Bringing in my usual cohort here on a Sunday afternoon, please help me welcome from thatparkplace.com, WDW Pro. Good to see you, buddy.
Let's see. We've got Hogwarts Legacy, top 10 video game of all time now. It looks like it's headed for $2 billion once
Top
it hits the
3.
Switch and the PS4. Exactly. Yeah. We've got major new announcements on DC and the tentpole franchises of Warner Brothers. We have basically confirmation now that Universal Studios is going after Disney in Europe. We have the MCU on its last legs in terms of being a cultural phenomenon. I mean, this is the Phase 5 dive. So I don't know, lackluster week in news maybe.
Yeah, nothing going on.
Nothing at all.
Just nothing at
and
all.
No special guests around here, are there?
None whatsoever.
No.
Well, we might have one.
Oh, just one? Okay,
just one.
We'll start with that.
One for now.
Okay.
So, folks, welcome aboard to the Valiant Renegade Online live show here for the first time ever. Please give a round of applause to the very lovely Miss Melanie Mack. Welcome aboard.
Yay, hi. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so glad we finally got to get this going. Now, we've talked for a while, and it's always like for most of us, schedules are kind of a bear sometimes. But I'm glad you got to make it here, Cocaine Bear. So no, I'm glad you got to make it. So say hi to the audience and tell everybody a little bit about yourself for those that may not know you, or they should. But
all right, hi everybody. My name is Melanie Mack. I have a YouTube channel called Melanie Mack Go Boom, where I talk about a bunch of nerd culture topics, things that are going on in the nerd culture sphere. I usually like to dunk on all the woke stuff that they keep trying to insert into everything. So yeah, I'll troll on all that kind of stuff, and then just talk about how I miss the good old days and how gaming and nerd culture in general used to just be a lot more fun than it has been lately. So it's mostly what I talk about there. I also stream video games on Twitch, and I've been streaming a lot of Hogwarts Legacy lately as well.
All right, so we have a number of things to kind of go through because Melanie, I want to get your thoughts on a lot of this stuff. because you and I, like I said, we've had a chance to talk a little bit offline, but I think in this format, just kind of going through everything that's happened this week. So first things first, we've got let's start with the Warner Brothers stuff, right? Because I do want to get to the Ant-Man and the Marvel stuff, because that's a train wreck at this point. But what we've got at this point is, and let me pull the article back up. Share your thoughts. So at this point, we're looking at potentially some new Lord of the Rings movies that, from all we can tell right now, is that Peter Jackson and his group are definitely going to be back on board working with Warner Brothers in some capacity. We don't know if he's going to be directing the films on the ground day to day. We don't know if he's going to be put in kind of a James Gunn position to where he's going to oversee that division like Gunn is with DC. But he's apparently going to be there. So kind of give us your thoughts on that as far as hopes or fears or whatever.
Well, it's funny because my immediate reaction was that I thought they were saying they were remaking them when I read the Variety article, and I was like, no freaking way. I was so mad. And then you corrected me, like sent me a DM, and you're like, hey, by the way, they're not actually remaking them. They're probably just going to do new stories like from the Tolkien universe and all that, or expound on, like, you know, maybe Aragorn's story or so on and so forth. That does give me a lot more peace of mind than my initial reaction toward it. I think that if they give Peter Jackson a lot of control over everything, then hey, I feel pretty optimistic about it. It just depends on the way things are going right now, though, in current Hollywood entertainment, all that, is that they like to take things that we're very nostalgic about and that we like, and even incorporate people on board who we would originally, you know, trust, but sometimes they don't give them the control that we'd want them to have, and they only want their name tied to it just to kind of get us on board. So my hope is that that's not the case with this, is that they will actually let Peter Jackson have a lot of control. I don't see how he would even want to be signed on without having enough control in the first place. So, right now I'm cautiously optimistic about it all.
I think that's a fair assessment, and I would agree with you. Cautiously optimistic is a good way to put it, because again, I can't see Peter Jackson remaking his own movies, and why would they be speaking to him since day one when David Zaslav got there? Wants to make sure that Lord of the Rings is one of the 3 big tentpole franchise IPs of Warner, alongside of Harry Potter and the DC universe. And of course, you know, Embracer wants to expand on what's already there. There's a very big difference between what Amazon acquired for $250 million, basically to use the name, The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And really not much else. A couple of scribblings on a bar napkin by Tolkien at some point. I mean, it's basically what it boils down to. Versus the actual book, The Lord of the Rings, and the actual book, The Hobbit. That is what Warner Brothers still holds film rights to at this point, or has them on license from Embracer. It's one of the reasons why they announced, let's do this War of the Rohirrim movie that's coming up in the next year or two, to basically keep that license flowing, right? It's animated. Peter Jackson is working on that one, so it only makes sense going forward. Now, I thought when I saw this in Pro, Steven, y'all jump in as well, I said, I'm thinking there's a lot in these books, The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, that they could easily do movies on. I mean, they could have an origin story on Eowyn, on Aragorn, I mean, you fill in the blanks. I mean, you can
Silmarillion.
Silmarillion, yeah. Or Silmarillion. I can't ever, I always.
I don't, I'm Canadian. Yeah. I don't need proper English.
So that's there's a lot that they can do to develop a lot of things that never made it to the screen, even with 4-hour extended editions, which I own all the copies of. So I don't know. Pro, Steven?
Well, I'm just curious how much this decreases enthusiasm for Rings of Power. I mean, wouldn't you like to be a fly on the wall there?
I think more like after everyone has watched Rings of Power and that travesty that they called writing and armor weaving, whatever the hell that cloth crap was, I think people are hungry for it. And it's going to come down to this. You're going to see Lord of the Rings. You're not going to see Rings of Power. You're going to see another story that hopefully gives you the same type of lore and based content that people are actually looking for. We already know The Hobbit. We already know like all of Lord of the Rings through the Peter Jackson stuff and the books, but we don't know anything about the world building of Middle Earth itself. They can do a Smeagol origin story. They can focus on the dragons. They can do so much other stuff around just those characters everyone knows, and actually try to get relatable stories for people who want more out of what is available.
Yeah, I think that Amazon and the Rings of Power peeps that are working on that, they're probably pooping their pants after seeing all this, because the thing is we already are very jaded with everything Rings of Power has done. The best thing that any sort of Tolkien Middle Earth property can do at this point is give us somebody on board who we can trust. In this case, Peter Jackson. And nobody's going to give any more craps than they already did for how terrible Rings of Power was. And all going to be focusing on this other stuff. If they, give fans what we want.
It's also not just the fans too. The problem is they need to start respecting the source material more.
Yes.
We can relate this to with Henry Cavill and the Witcher stuff. It's the same thing. It's Star Wars, same thing. For even Last of Us now, HBO Last of Us has gone. I'm irritated by the last episode. I'm not going to go into that. But they have taken source material that they have available and they squander it and only use bits and pieces rather than actually develop the story based off of what's there and literally give an adaptation that is called an adaptation. I'm tired of hearing modern audiences that cancer in mainstream media. They insult fans, yet they want our money. They grift our feelings and yet tell us we're bad people when we don't like it. And yet they are living in an echo chamber that is an outside world of how reality and real people work. And Rings of Power is that failure. Star Wars, the Disney trilogy. If you like it, cool. I'm not insulting you. Same thing. We're going to see the same crap with Little Mermaid. We're going to see the same crap. And we did with Pixar and Buzz Lightyear. That was an absolute failure. Strange World, failure. Ant-Man and the D dialogue with MODOK. It's the same stuff. They're not in touch with anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I see some folks out there in the chat. I just happened to glance over. I see Mr. H is out there talking about the Embracer statement, and he's right. And I think it's probably Mr. H. That's the same Embracer statement that we mentioned when I did the video on the Lord of the Rings thing a few days ago. And if you actually were to read it, it does not seem to indicate any kind of reboot, remake whatsoever. And he's right. They're looking for either what you'd call a spin-off or just stories and elements that they have not previously explored. Do we have any idea what that might look like yet? No, we can guess. But I again, like you, Melanie, I'm cautiously optimistic on that. And to your question, I think, and look, I'll remind folks, for those that were watching the Warner Brothers earnings call live that we covered Thursday afternoon this week, David Zaslav, even during the Q&A session, made a remark about, look, Amazon's over there doing Rings of Power. We've got the movie rights. We've got. He was the way he was saying, and I have to go back and pull the clip from the live show. He was basically just kind of waving off Amazon with that. Like, we've got real Lord of the Rings over here, and we're not doing anything with it. What the hell's going on? Amazon's over here making knockoff trash. We've got the real stuff. We have, we don't have brand X. We have name brand Lord of the Rings. It's sitting there. What the hell?
He's also declaring that it's a tent pole. And he's putting it on the same lines as DC and Harry Potter. And what that tells me is that the floodgates are about to open in terms of content, because you don't name something one of your tentpole franchises unless you plan to create all kinds of properties around it. Why would you do that if it's just going to be a one-off or a two-off? There's clearly a pipeline being built for these major divisions at Warner Brothers as they look to, and we've talked about this before, why they're interested in rejuvenating these franchises, but they want them to be very healthy for the years to come. That's DC, that's Harry Potter, that's Lord of the Rings, and it's all steps forward for those properties.
Renegade.